This is a short bite episode of Homeschool Together. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have a chance, head down into the show notes to see how you can support the podcast and leave us a review. That would be great. We are continuing with our long line of curriculum reviews. We have completed RightStart Math Level C. This is our third segment of RightStart Math.
Yeah, we're collecting the whole set.
We are. We've got all the Pokemon cards.
This is good because we invested in the manipulative set, which was a little bit expensive at first, and we weren't sure if it was going to be all worth it, but we've really enjoyed RightStart.
Yes. And so continuing on, we'll keep this as a short review because I'll go ahead and link all the earlier reviews that we have done around this curriculum. This is just obviously the next level of the curriculum that we've done. An update. So basically level C is focused on mainly, I would say about 4 specific topics, continuing with addition and subtraction, but adding additional place values. So going all the way up to hundreds and thousands place value. Talking about borrowing, like so if you're doing subtraction, you're borrowing from the next place value. If you are adding, you are carrying the one to the next one, the classic things that we all remember from early math. Additionally, there was a large segment within this curriculum centered on time. Yet again, we covered time for the 7th time. We have covered time. I think my daughter is finally getting it. Additionally, more money has been brought up, but now because we have a lot of great math skills around addition and subtraction, starting to think about, taking change and providing change. A lot more complex kind of word problems where they are playing with the terminology, like, what is the difference between this, or how many more until I have this, and having to get your kid to, wrap their head around the language of handling these word problems that are more of the regular speak that they would encounter out in the wild. That's not just simply, what is 12 minus 4?
Right. Something that's a little bit more realistic. Now, is this still going to be, this is still totally parent-led, right? This isn't something she's reading. You are still reading this to her. Have you noticed any change in the amount of parent involvement going from B to C?
B to C, there was a big change, specifically around the worksheets. Now, if you're on A or B, you'll notice that they start to bring in more worksheets along the way, especially I think in level B they did. In level C, it's literally almost every lesson has a worksheet.
Oh, interesting.
Because the funny thing is we're starting to outstrip the manipulatives, because a lot of those early manipulatives were like basic counting. Okay, here's a tens, here's a tens card and here's a hundreds card, and how are we building our different place values, and how are we thinking about adding and subtracting? Mm-hmm. We're past that now, right? My daughter can look at it and say, well, that's 364. She doesn't need 300 tiles and 6 tens tiles and 4 ones. She doesn't need that anymore. We are now using the other side of the abacus as well, which allows you
We've graduated.
Yes, we have. Which allows you to do higher place value addition, using the vertical nature of the abacus as opposed to just the horizontal, where you have the symbol 100 beads. If you flip it over, you can get all the way to thousands. And it allows you to easily identify when, things are, over 10, so you can carry and add that to the next place value. So addition and subtraction, big time. There was a nice stretch of time and money. So, those are kind of like, we're always getting those. There was a nice stretch of geometry. So we were talking about different shapes. I can't
believe we're doing geometry like this early.
It's basically shapes and drawing halves. And the reason why they were doing that is they were kind of wrapping their heads around breaking things into pieces, because that led into, at the end, fractions and division. So
we're starting to get into early fractions,
early division, and that was towards the end. So it was just touched on. It wasn't like whole long segments.
Did that feel like a big jump, or did it feel like because you'd done all the shapes, it was really a natural progression?
I think the way they've introduced multiplication, because it's the doubling, it's how many is this, and we did touch on multiplication again. There was it wasn't a lot of multiplication, but there was enough because they used it to talk about area and perimeter and more geometry. So the multiplication was being used as a vehicle to discuss geometry concepts. So they touched on it. She's already done a lot of multiplication, low end multiplication, 5 times 4, 8 times 3, simple things like that. Nothing high order like 7 times 7. Higher level products where you get the answer is just like, closer to 100 is all easier stuff that she can go,
right.
Oh, what's 4 fours? And 4 plus 4 plus 4. She can see that it's 12. This is a little bit of a springboard into geometry, but again, teaching the concepts, she understands it. At the end with the division, it just carried on from a lot of the fractions and a lot of the fraction work that was done, specifically around measurement and the geometry. So talking about things as halves and quarters and thirds and fifths, and being able to write that and understanding, oh, that's 1 out of 5, springboarding into, well, let's think about how many times does 5 go into 20, or how many times does 2 go into 8. And that just was really easy for her to see because we were doing the doubling. So it's 2. So it's like, if it's like 2 times 4, she was saying, okay, there's 4 2s. Okay. But now let's imagine we have 8. How many times does 2 go into there? 4. And so it just made sense. And I've noticed that the division came very easily because of the way they handled the multiplication earlier, where it wasn't just, we're just crunching through the formula. It was a lot of just early work that was done to understand that this is the same number added multiple times, and that it was used in various, arenas like geometry or addition or whatever it might be, or like in the word problems or an area. We're doing area calculations of certain shapes. She just got that. Yeah. Right. And so, okay, great. We're talking about arrays and we're talking about shapes and we're calculating area. Multiplication makes a ton of sense because you're breaking up into little blocks.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised when she was able to do some of those lower figure multiplication problems. I was really surprised.
Absolutely. So those are kind of the 4 areas. It was kind of like, I call them the miscellaneous subjects, but all the miscellaneous subjects like, math, the money, the time, and a lot of the shape work feed into the other concepts that have been expounded on earlier in the section. And I think the whole middle part, like if you could almost think of as the entire curriculum was kind of broken into 3 pieces. They caught you back up on your addition and subtraction, did a lot of addition and subtraction work up front. A lot of the tricks of saying, okay, well, if I'm subtracting 15 and say, take 7 from 15, right? Well, one of the ways I can do that is I can break 7 into a 5 and 2. I can take 15 down to 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. Just making easier math problems. Those type of tricks, they covered that a bunch of times. So it's just ways you can start.
That's kind of what some of the Common Core, the way that they're trying to get people to be able to do a little bit more mental math, right?
Exactly. But it was really, really needed because once you start doing a lot of subtraction problems, say like 1,492 minus 385, you're doing a lot of math of like, potentially, because if you're borrowing from the previous place value, you're going to be doing 13 minus 6, 15 minus 4, 4, or 15 minus 8, right? And you need to be able to do those quickly. Right. Otherwise, you just get bogged down. And so they did that work up front to get a lot of experience to then start to be able to do, the math problems and be able to do them fast and quickly. One of the things I noticed is that my daughter needed a little bit more work. So we went ahead and pulled in a Kumon book, and I think we'll review that coming up as well, where I was just having her do math problems every day. We're talking like 25 addition, 25 subtraction problems. I just had her do those as part of her test, as part of her like warm-up work. In the book, they still have the warm-up work, but I just thought she needed a little bit more, and I didn't want to have to sit there and invent my own math problems every single day. I was doing that, and I was like, this is just getting really boring. I need to be able to have a book that she can just do these 4 columns of math problems and, let's move on. So as I said earlier, they're doing a lot more worksheets. So we were obviously still using the manipulatives almost every day. There's some type of manipulative, whether you're doing the shapes work and you're doing tanagrams and rubber band work or whatever, or if you're doing your abacus work and you're talking about place value, almost every single lesson still has the manipulatives, but it's being pared down a little bit more and it's being replaced by a little bit of the worksheets. So almost every lesson had a worksheet for her to work on, which was nice because I could do the lesson, we could do the exercises, I could give you the worksheet and you could do the work and I can kind of sit back. It kind of felt a little in that respect, math-mammoth-y, where she was able to do some problems and do some exercises. Sometimes with those worksheets, she still need my help to explain the problem and whatnot. I think because she's at this level C, they may expect kids to read the problems a little bit more, but she's not to that level reading wise. So
right, because she's only finishing first grade.
She's still technically first grade.
Do you feel that C has been a bigger time commitment than B? Or is it similar?
I feel like level A, when maybe I started a little early with her, but B went quicker, and C I felt went even quicker. And I don't know if that's because, she just gets math, or I've noticed that she's really good at, maybe the curriculum's a little bit easier now. We're not having to overcome the simple problems of like, what is 12? How do you write 13?
Right. Okay.
We're not doing those problems. So we're in the land of conceptual understanding.
Maybe you're
now.
like, doing some more just tiny increments, so it's easier to go through.
Yeah.
So, one of the things we've always said about RightStart Math, we do RightStart Math. We also do Math Mammoth. Yep. We do other workbooks and things to supplement. One thing that we've always felt is that RightStart Math lays this very solid and complete conceptual foundation for math. Do you feel like C is still just continuing in that vein?
Just continuing in. I love how they're introducing the multiplication and division slowly. It's not like, okay, sit down, kid, prepare to get your mind blown with multiplication.
Let's memorize our times tables.
Yeah, no, they don't do that.
Do they memorize times tables anymore? I know that was a thing for us.
It probably is a thing.
Children of the 90s.
But they started, I think, introducing a little bit of multiplication at the end of B. And then this time again, they introduce it again, but it's not hot and heavy. It's just light. And I have a feeling the way it's being introduced is that by the time we are doing a lot of multiplication, I think I looked in the D, and I think there's more multiplication there, but it's still spread out. Mm-hmm. It's not all multiplication. I wonder if that slowly emerging concept is going to make things more enjoyable and easier to, understand when she finally gets into multiplication. One of the
Maybe she won't be memorizing them all.
Yeah, exactly. One of the cool, and I think they also touched a little bit on negative numbers. So they just touched on it. That's been a concept that I've introduced to her already, because she's asked me, well, Daddy, why can I swap the numbers in addition? But I can't do it in subtraction.
Yeah,
so I showed her on a number line that, if you go below 0, she goes, well, what's below 0? Well, I said, well, here you go.
It's a natural extension.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, let's talk about negative numbers. And then, and then I dare we go into the complex space. That's even bigger. But, so they did touch a little bit on negative numbers. So they will begin to use that. I think specifically that is important for when you start to get into algebra, when you're starting to the idea of like, okay, I'm adding, 3, and maybe I'll have 3x here and 4x here, and that gives me negative x. So if I add that over to the other side, it becomes positive x, that type of thing. I think if they need to introduce that now, maybe in preparation for that. We did a lot of horizontal math problems, and my daughter just doesn't like horizontal math problems very much because she gets the place values wrong.
Yeah.
And so
it's good to see him that way, though.
It is good to see him. A lot of times I've told her to, okay, just rewrite it as a vertical math problem, and you can then go ahead and do it that way. And obviously that makes a lot more sense for her because, okay, I can see the place values vertically aligned. That works well for her. She doesn't like the horizontal stuff as much. They do a lot of like in your head work. And I don't like that as much, especially at this age, because my daughter really likes to want to do it in her head. She doesn't want to do the work. And that can tend to lead to a lot of wrong answers, especially on like some of the assessments or some of the like even on the workbook work that I have her doing now on the Kumon book. She wants to do it in her head. She doesn't want to actually do all the work. And the problem is that she just doesn't get it like super well. So she starts to make mistakes. So I tried to stay away from any of the activities that said, do this in your head. Like there's a bunch of assessments where it says, hey, what's 23 minus 15? And you're supposed to tell them that, and then they have to write the answer. And I'm like, no. You can write the problem down, translate what I'm telling you, and then go ahead and write the answer, because I don't like her doing a lot of stuff in her head right now until she's, further along the path and has a lot more confidence in her capabilities, especially around, a lot of math work with addition and subtraction. I just want her to really work through that on hand and have that muscle memory and have that repeated experience of solving those problems, so it just becomes second nature. I don't want her to do a lot of stuff in her head. So I skipped a little bit of those activities.
Do you think that will hurt at all? Like, is that like a core piece that she needs, the ability to do it in her head? I know we do a lot of, this is one of the areas I think that games are so helpful, because she does a lot of mental math during games.
She's doing it.
Do you think that maybe during games she's not so intimidated by the mental math, whereas you're sitting down to do the lesson, maybe she feels more like pressure?
I feel like
perfectionism, which we know she can struggle with.
There's a little bit of a streak of that, is when she gets things wrong and she feels like, oh, I'm not being perfect enough. So I don't want to allow her to walk herself into that corner. So I do avoid that. The other thing too is if in a playful sense, like with games and stuff, fine, do the math in your head. I don't care. If you get it wrong, whatever. But this is like, this matters here. We need to get these answers correct. Math is one of those, the hard sciences needs to be correct. It's not an opinion-based type of thing. So it is, 2 + 2 is 4, right? So it's like, you can't argue that. And I need you to get the right answer. Although the other thing too is I'm more of a forgiving person, in the sense that, when you're doing a lot of math or a lot of science, you're doing a lot of, computations and whatnot, and you're bound to make a mistake, right? So I want to see your work because I want to see your thinking.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's, for me, I will reward wrong answers if the thinking was correct and you just made a silly mistake, right? That I know you know that 8 - 4 is 4. Like, sometimes it's very funny because she's doing so many problems, she just forgets to look at the operator. Like, this is a subtraction problem, so she'll do subtraction, and then add the hundreds, because she's just like, I'm just doing so many problems. There's so much going on. I'm not paying attention. That I forgive those type of mistakes, because that's just, she's just doing practice. But with respect to like doing things from the mind, I don't like that as much right now, but she will need to know that later. Like, when you're adding, different, when you're doing algebraic equations and you're having to do a quick addition, obviously you're going to do that in your head and you're just going to do simplification. That was even kind of funny because we did so many horizontal problems, and they do a lot of like, oh, what is this missing value here to get this answer? So like 8 plus underline equals 16. What is the value? I mean, that is like, you just replaced the missing value with X, and now you're doing basic algebra, right?
Yeah.
And I actually did that a couple times where I just said, oh, here, let's do these problems. I go, what would you do to get rid of the 8 on this side? How would you, just physically, if something was sitting here, what would you do? Well, I would take it away.
Yeah,
I said, well,
can think that way.
Then what would you do to the other side? Well, I want to do the same thing over here. And so we actually did some algebra stuff where I had her, simplifying equations and adding to both sides or subtracting from both sides. And she really just got that. And I think she got that because of all the great work that is in this book. So I can see in the future when like we get to E and F levels, if they start to introduce those type of concepts, she's just going to get it. It's just going to be right on.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
So anyway, pretty happy with level C. And we're, so we started doing, I think right around like lesson 70 or 80, we started doing the early work on Math Mammoth. So I began
Mammoth 2.
Math Mammoth 2, I began to layer it under.
Right, because Math Mammoth is a little bit higher level than RightStart, as far as like RightStart A doesn't correspond to Math Mammoth level 1, because A would be started in kindergarten,
And
it's kind of what they
tend,
but
Math
like Mammoth
overlapped.
is first grade.
Yeah, they're a little overlapped.
Yeah, they're not like perfect.
Like level 1 would be like A and a bit into B, and then 2 is B and C.
But we really like Math Mammoth and joining them because it can help give her great practice. So one of the
practice
things,
work, yep.
One of the things I think is important to note on this, we always purchase just the teacher text for RightStart Math, and then we get the worksheets, the e-worksheets option, so that we can just print them. I think this has a couple of advantages. One, you can use it for your next child, which we are planning to use it for our younger daughter when it's her time. But the other thing is, if our daughter struggles with a worksheet or she struggles with an assessment or something, we can just reprint it, like have a fresh slate, and she can do it again. We can also mark those and say, okay, we'll go back at the end and we did do this, and have her redo a few of the ones that maybe she struggled on in the moment. And now that, see if she does have that mastery. So I think that the digital worksheets, I think they're just slightly more expensive than the hardbound workbook, but the ability to reprint and the ability to use for a second child, I think makes them more than worth it.
And the way you did it, where you punched the holes and we had it in the binder, it's just so useful for me to, when I'm getting prepared in the morning, just to pop the binder, pull that sheet out, put it right on the, the lesson, maybe even preload the first, the next 3 or 4 lessons with that sheet. And so it makes my work a lot easier to have them free and, in a binder. It was really nice.
Yeah.
So that was a RightStart Math C. We were very happy with it. We are moving on to D.
Yeah. After we finish Math Mammoth, we'll move on to D.
So we'll probably start RightStart D, I think sometime in the summer. So we're going to take a couple months here. To finish Math Mammoth. It'll take a couple months to do that, and so that'll be a nice review, and then we'll move on to D, and hopefully, at the rate we were going, we'll probably finish D, end of the year, maybe a little bit into next year. So, we're moving along. Math is a good one, and I've been very happy with RightStart Math. So we hope you guys enjoy these little reviews.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!